Hi guys, my name is Alba Diego and I'm going to be giving you my speech on Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, his actual name, as we know, is Steve Jobs, but his name is actually Stephen Paul Jobs. And he was born on February 24th, 1955 in San Francisco, California to Joanne and John, two University Wisconsin graduate students who gave their unnamed son up for adoption. His father was a Syrian political science professor, and his mother, Joanne, worked as a speech therapist. Shortly after Steve was placed for adoption, his biological parents married and had another child, Mona, and it is not until Job was 27 that he was able to uncover information on his biological parents. As an infant, Paul was adopted by Claire and Paul Jobs and named him Stephen Paul Jobs. Claire had worked as an accountant, and Paul was a Coast Guard veteran and a machinist. Okay. If any of you guys know, and which everybody basically knows, Steve Jobs is the creator of Apple. Now, Apple has come to a lot of things. When Apple started, it was just a computer. If any of you remember seeing Legally Blonde, it used to be the colorful laptops that you would get them, and they would come like in orange, yellow, blue, green, or you would have like the big monitors, and they came like in different colors. Then Apple started innovating and changing all their looks and processor. Then you would remember the little Apple. The little Apple was like a rainbow like just a complete rainbow. It just was a complete, it's still the same Apple like it is now, but it used to be like a little rainbow. So basically there's pre-Apple, then there's present Apple. So in pre-Apple, and it was in 1972, where he and one of his really good friends that he met in college and through high school, was Stephen Wonankin. And Stephen Wonankin designed his own visual version of a classic video game of Pong. After finishing it, Wonankin gave board to Jobs, and then who took the game down to Atari. Because at the time, Jobs went to a community college, and then he really didn't like it. 6 months after, he dropped out of that college, and then he started working in Atari. And then Atari thought that Jobs had built it and gave him a job as a technician, which he didn't. Wonankin was usually the one that he invented the game. Not Pong. He invented a version of that game, Pong. Steve's gave it to Atari. Atari thought that Steve's is the one that built it, and in reality he wasn't. So actually Atari gave him a job as a technician. And Atari's co-founder, Nolan Bushnell, later described him as difficult but valuable. Pointed out that he was very often the smartest guy in the room, and that he would let people know that. In the mid-1973, Jobs moved back to San Francisco Bay Area, and he rented his own apartment. After that, renting that apartment, in 1974, Jobs actually left Atari, and instead of living in the States, he actually went to India. So around mid-1974, Jobs actually started traveling through India to visit a couple peoples, and then there were later people that were actually later on became to be his employees that he visited in India. In search of a spiritual enlightenment, that's one of the reasons why he went to India. And then he got there. After staying 7 months in India, Jobs left and returned back to the US ahead of Daniel Cockton, and Jobs had changed his appearance. His head was shaved, he wore traditional Indian clothes. During his time, Jobs experimented with psychedelics, later calling his LSD experience one of the 2 or 3 most important things he had done in his life. He spent a period at the All-in-One Farm. It was Communion, Oregon, and joined him there. He basically, you're talking about the 1970s and probably late 1960s, where there was a lot of I would say experiments on drugs, any kind of drug at that point. Then Jobs went back to Atari and was assigned as a to create a circuit board for an arcade video game Breakout. According to Bushman, Atari offered US dollars of $100 to each TTL chip that eliminated into the machine. Jobs had little specialization knowledge on the circuit board design and made a deal with Lonkin to split the fee evenly between them if Lonkin can minimize the number of chips. Lonkin did reduce the chips, which he started. I doesn't and I never found out, but he reduced the TLL count to 46, a design so tight that it was impossible to reduce on an assembly line. And according to Lonkin, Jobs told him that Atari gave him only $700 instead of the $5,000 payout. Lonkin did not learn about the actual bonus until 10 years later, but said that if Jobs had told him about it, that would explain that he needed the money. Lonkin would give it to him. So now we go into Apple, because that was pre-Apple, like what made Lonkin and Jobs basically get together. So then Jobs attended meetings at the computer club with Lonkin in 1975. And in 1976, Lonkin invented the Apple I computer after Lonkin showed it to Jobs, who suggested that they would sell it. And then Ronald Wayne from Apple Computer in the garage of Jobs' Los Altos home. Wayne stayed only a short time, leaving Jobs and Lonkin as active primary co-founders of the company. A neighbor, Chris Drive, recalls Jobs as an odd individual who would greet his clients with his underwear hanging out and barefoot, hippie-like. Again, he did go to India. Once he came back from India, a lot of people said that they would always see him in Indian clothes, sandals. He did shave his head. He was wearing, I would like to say like Gandhi glasses that he would be wearing. And then another neighbor who had finished his PhD at Stanford in chemical engineering recalled dismissing Jobs as a buddy business, and he would punch in cards, put them in the big deck, and he would mainframe the machines at the time. Steve took me over to the garage, and he had a circuit board with a chip on it, and a Mu TV, and a okay. Then in 1977, Jobs and Lonkin introduced the Apple II, which there was, like I said, it's all conclusive. It's Apple 1, 2, and 3. And later on, after 1978, Jobs was worth for $1 million when he was 23 years old. So you're talking about 23, he was already worth a certain amount of money. At this point, he still did not know who his biological parents were. In 1978, Apple recruited Mike Scott from the National Subcontractor to serve as a CEO. What turned out to be several turbulent years. In 1983, Jobs lured John Scali away from Pensacola and served as Apple CEO, asking, "Do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water, or do you want a chance to change the world?" Those are pretty big words to tell somebody who Pensacola is a big company. But you think of Apple, and Apple's constantly changing. A soda is always going to be a soda, to me. At least that's the way that I look at it. And I think he did good in saying that. And then in early 1984, Apple introduced the Macintosh. Which, again, Macintosh was like the big, like, little Apple with the rainbow colors, which is based on the Lisa. And the following year, Apple aired a Super Bowl television commercial titled 1984 at Apple's annual shareholders meeting on January 24th, 1984. An emotional Jobs introduced Macintosh to a wildly enthusiastic audience. In May of 1985, Scali decided to reorganize Apple and propose it to a board that removed Jobs from Macintosh Group and put him in charge of the new product development. Now we're gonna fast forward to already to the 90s, where Apple was already growing a big deal. In 1996, Apple announced that it would buy Next for $427 million. And then after that, it slowly started becoming like something that we would all do, especially for some of us who have Macs, or we have iPhones, or we have iPads. We want to constantly be looking at. It was the thing, at least to me it was, and to my brother who actually works in Apple, it was a thing to actually look at Steve Jobs videos every time he would come up on the stage and he would show like, this is the new phone, this is what it's gonna do. And I remember seeing Jobs on his last one of his very last presentations where he did, and honestly it was to me one of the best presentations he would probably give. So it's great that we've had many people who've shown us different things, and with that, Apple's still growing with or without Steve Jobs there. That tells you how much of a company has raised from what used to be in a garage and has raised to something so highly and known. I hope that you guys have learned something about this. I hope you guys will now probably go off and buy a MacBook. I mean, the best that I can tell you is technology is going to be constantly changing, whether it's Apple or whether it's Samsung. I chose Steve Jobs because Steve Jobs shows that you can start from a garage and make something so great out of a company. And this company constantly is changing things. There's not one day that we don't hear something about Apple changing something on the phones or the chip. And there's A6, A7, A8, and the iOS 8, 9, for God's sakes, is probably going to go on and on and on. And you never see it not just stopping in one place, and it just keeps going. I want to thank everybody who watched my video today, and have a nice day.